Hello and welcome to this week's Mystic Message. This week's message is around the upheaval collectively, externally, that we are all really experiencing and feeling and witnessing in one way or another. And what I mean by that is this is not necessarily the internal upheaval, although there are a lot of people really experiencing that. But what this message is about is the external upheaval. It is the world around us, kind of in this in between. It's being uprooted. Things are changing. We know that things are shifting and we're watching it, right? We're watching it in the news. Things that we never would have thought would even get the attention of the news. Things like, human trafficking and, sexual abuse that was so quiet. We don't talk about that, however long ago. We didn't talk about those things and now we're talking about it. That is huge. It may be graphic and we don't want to think about it, but it's been happening and it's a beautiful thing, in my opinion, that we're talking about it and that we're caring about it. We're watching, celebrities get called out. We're watching this big upheaval of these kind of bigger faces and powers that be. On the other hand, we're also watching almost like the audacity, like what is happening? How is this the world we're living in, right? If you turn on the news or even scroll through kind of social media, you probably find yourself thinking and feeling, what the hell is going on? Have we entered some, time warp or some alternate reality? How is this our political structure? How are these things coming out of the mouths of people that are, running things? Like the audacity, right? And again, it is this upheaval. And we're basically at this tipping point. And think of it like, imagine almost like a grenade being thrown in the middle of a desert and going off. And as that grenade goes off, imagine that is taking place in slow motion. And it's not being hit at a person, right? It's just in the middle of the desert, right? And so the explosive goes off and sand goes everywhere. It gets uprooted from the earth. It's no longer stable and secure on the ground. It's up in the air. And so all of these sand particles, kind of up in the air floating. And again, imagine this in super slow motion and everything's up in the air. And just imagine that as a pause. And imagine every grain of sand is one of us. And we have just been uprooted. Our reality has been flipped. We feel very unstable and ungrounded and very insecure in our lives, our basic needs. And what happens when we're in that space, especially when we haven't done a lot of the deep-rooted shadow work, is we find ourselves scared. Again, imagine you're that grain of sand. You're up here and you're like, what's going on? And you're terrified. And when you're in that fear of what's going to happen to my life, my family, my well-being, we're in that space of fear, and then the ego comes and takes over. And again, the more we get to know the ego, the more, I don't want to say power we have over it, but awareness we have when it's running the show. And those of you who have done that work, you know when your ego is showing up. And you also know that your ego is just there to keep you safe. And so while you're feeling this super ungrounded, unstable, what is happening in my reality, I can't even fathom what 5 years from now could look like, the ego is stepping in, and the ego is just there to keep you safe, to calm you down so that you can keep going on with your life. And so when we find ourselves in kind of almost fear and ego, the easiest thing to do is almost look at each other and point the finger. And this is why the duality of our reality is really like the polarity that has been created from the duality, from these opposing energies, turning into polarity where they're each just kind of pointing the finger at each other, right? Whether it's political or, even on smaller scales, say even in the spiritual community, there's very opposing views. Whatever it is, you're these grains of sand, and instead of recognizing who threw the grenade, maybe there's something bigger at play. Maybe maybe there's someone else we should be, wondering about, or something else. Or even thinking, how do I want to land? Right? We're pointing the finger at each other. We're looking at each other like, oh my gosh, like, well, I got to land in the perfect spot, so you're in my way, right? It becomes competition. It becomes this pointing the finger. It becomes who's right and who's wrong. And that is where we're at. So we're at this point where we've just been like uprooted, upheaval, we're floating up here, and we're like, we have this beautiful opportunity to decide how we want to land. Do we want to land in this fear-based, pointing the finger, that at the end of the day, it's really just feeling out of control? If you are feeling very polarized, if you are feeling like the news is too much and it's really engulfing you, and you find yourself scared, and you find yourself in that almost self-righteous place, it's because you're craving control. And, the more that you recognize what you're feeling while you're up here, we're in this pause, right? This grenade went off, and these sand particles floating up in the air, and pause. You have this opportunity to figure out what is keeping you in those low vibrational places. If you go to land and you're still in fear and attempt to control your life in the narrative and other people, right? Trying to control what other people think, trying to control what other people do because it makes you feel safe and it makes you feel secure. What if you didn't pay attention to those people? What if you only paid any attention to where you're gonna land, right? What if you only paid attention to the vibration that you want to be in when you land? Because at the end of the day, law of attraction, like attracts like. The vibration that you're in when you land is the reality that you're going to start to anchor into. And we're at this space where it's almost a mirror of our history, right? They always say, history repeats itself. And there's a lot of wounds around Atlantis showing up right now. So if you are feeling panic, fear, completely out of control, to the point where you desire control. You want to control the narrative, you want to control what other people think, you crave that level of control because there was a point in time when you didn't have it. And it may have manifested in childhood, but there might be something deeper. There's a historical component. And whether that is your own karmic path of having a lifetime in Atlantis or another civilization where something went to shit, or it's ancestral in nature, or even if it's neither, and it's just by being here as a human and on Earth and kind of ingrained into the matrix system here, we receive and almost have this ingrained programming from our history as a species. This could be your first lifetime on Earth, and you might have wounds as if you've been here before, and you haven't, right? And so it doesn't matter where it stems from, but you're being triggered. As this explosion is taking place, you can take it as an opportunity of what you want to anchor into. And if you're someone who's done a lot of shadow work and inner deep healing work, you're probably kind of excited secretly. You might see the things happening and have compassion for those who are being harmed by the audacity of kind of the powers that be. But you also are a little bit excited because deep down you know that this is an opportunity for change on a big collective level. If you feel like that, congratulations, you've done some great work. If you are kind of in between, you might have some additional work to do. If you are in just complete panic mode, then this is a moment to really dive deep into the shadow and really even just by taking this moment and to acknowledge that there might be some deep rooted wounds around Atlantis showing up for you. That can start to clear some of that baggage, especially if it's karmic in nature. Atlantis, if we just as a brief summary, depending on your beliefs, but what I believe and what I've received over the years, they went too far. They went too far into ego. They went too far into power. The beautiful civilization of Lemuria was kind of this almost utopian reality that I think a lot of us would love to go back to. It wasn't, the technology was a blend of, external but internal and nature based. And it wasn't intended to have control or this kind of egoic look at me or expansion. It was for the internal expansion instead of this kind of external status in a way. And there were a lot of beings. I've seen a lot of lifetimes in Atlantis and a lot of people that knew that this was going badly. And they watched it go down because either no one listened to them or they didn't speak up or they didn't have a voice. They didn't have the ability to have a voice. And not having the control there and watching everything burn, your civilization, maybe your family, that is intense. And that is a mirror for right now. Right now, things are blowing up and it can go one of two ways. It can go poorly and it can go to a magical place, And as we are these grains of sand and we begin to fall, it is your opportunity and it is your moment. This is where you create the reality that you want as you go to land, because while you're not anchored and you're about to anchor back in, what do you want to anchor into? Do you want to anchor into love and collectiveness and freedom? Okay, so pour your focus there. Don't watch the news every morning. Don't focus so heavily. You're just allowing yourself to be programmed into that, to anchor that in once you land. And so I hope that this really helps and gives you almost a sense of power and sovereignty of like, this is an opportunity. It may seem scary, and that is okay. You can face that fear. You can take your power back from the powers that be that are trying to trigger that fear, to try and trigger you into ego mode, right? Because the ego is the caveman, right? The darker energies want you in caveman mode, because caveman mode is, I just need to survive. I will do anything to survive. And it doesn't matter, what it is, right? And we're more than that. We're more than just the ego. We're more than just the caveman mentality. We can find safety by taking a chance and a leap of faith and trusting that something new and beautiful is out there for us and our collective reality. So take this time, take this upheaval moment to disconnect from the fear, to disconnect from the need to be in control, and heal whatever wounds need to be healed, and then let go and surrender and be that grain of sand that is in flow and in surrender and in trust. And where you land will be that higher vibrational space. It will be this newer reality where freedom is coming. It may not come next year, but it will. And it's the timeline, there's a timeline for everything. Which timeline do you want to contribute to creating? Right? All right. I hope that this helps. And again, if you have some deep-rooted healing to do, just feel into it, just be open to it, and just allow it to flow through. You don't need to know with your mind what is happening. Let the emotions flow through, and that will clear it. All right? Just open the door and let it flow. Mwah.